Hello, everyone. You are listening to episode number 85 of the Avocado Gamescast, the Avocado's gaming podcast. So, we are all number one God gamers here at the Avocado Gamescast. We've accomplished so many amazing gaming feats. Some of us do Halo Lasso runs, some of us are amateur speedrunners, and others of us have somehow endured Sonic the Hedgehog. But even the most skilled gaming experts among us have had the experience of getting stuck in a video game and having to consult a guide to get unstuck. So, what we're going to talk about today is our experiences with guides and walkthroughs, how they've evolved over the years, and the role that they play now in the games industry and the gaming community. My name's Merve, and joining me today, he wrote a thesis on Orion gastric juices. It's Wolfman Jew.
Hello, all.
He was just 10 seconds behind Jervelin on getting Critical's bounty. It's the Kappa.
Not even close. I can't believe that happened. I watched it live and it's still mind blowing to me. Big congrats.
And finally, they're the unbreakable but very bakeable master of Oredo. Give a warm welcome to Wafflicious.
Howdy.
So, how are y'all doing?
Awesome. It's good. Good evening after a long week. So
Pretty good for once.
That's good. Glad to hear everyone's doing great. And just on the subject of that bounty, what that was for doing Halo 2 Lasso on Legendary, that's part of Lasso, without dying.
hmm
Yeah, that's nuts that like it was
it's
within a
incredible.
couple of weeks of the
Yeah.
bounty it was done.
I haven't read up on exactly. I know it's been attempted a bunch of times, and I think Javali, I can't
Jervalin, I
remember.
believe.
Javalin, yeah. I know he'd been working on Halo for a long time and then kind of given up on it. It didn't seem like it was going to be something. And then I was actually watching the stream, Moist Critical stream, when they found out a way to get past the prison. And that was like the missing key to the whole run. And then I got to watch the final run live, and it was incredible. His family's just screaming in the background. He's so happy. It was a really cool moment.
For reference, the prison I played casually on like normal, and I must have died 50 times because that's one of the
Yeah.
hardest parts of that game. And oh my god, I actually like I had the bug where it just wouldn't give me checkpoints and I actually had to
Mhm.
restart the level because I was dying so much and getting sent back like 20 minutes. So I got very familiar with that level and it is not easy. So glad they found a way to kind of bypass that.
It's just an interesting time when you're starting to see bounties for impossible gaming feats. I like that so much better than, I don't know, some of the other stuff that people are out there doing. It's just good on them for having the bounty and good on him for completing it. But I just think it was a cool idea just to do this thing that everybody thought was impossible, put some money behind it and see if people can do it.
Yeah, the
Watching
way
things go
so,
from like tasks where only a computer can do it to actual human use is
hmm
every time it's incredible.
I love watching those YouTube videos where like they'll explain somebody found something in tasks and then like now was can a player do it? And then players try and try and try. Like I think Rainbow Road was one of the big ones. There was like a skip someone found that the task could do, but nobody thought a human could do it. And then over time people finally figured it out. It's like the one where you turn around and then jump backwards. It is a very interesting thing. And like the task stuff I think is like a cool tool to figure it out. But I know everybody's got different opinions on it. For me, it's not a real record until a person does it. Like that's the
Yeah.
real record.
yeah, it's been so cool like seeing human runs evolve. I think now was it Super Mario or Super Mario World where now the human record is within half a second of the task record. That's
Oh
just
man,
mind-blowing to me.
yeah.
So, we've all been playing video games, presumably. What have y'all been playing lately? Uh, Kappa, what have you been up to?
I'll start out. I don't think anybody's ready gonna predict this one. So, I've been super into Power Washing Simulator. It is.
Ooh, good choice.
It's such a dad game. like my kids are like, oh, he's at it again. They just come upstairs and it's like, oh, yeah, this game again. I think one interesting thing, I think is, I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, where it was like, there's not a lot of ways to interact with video games, right? And so like shooting is just a mechanic that always has made sense, right? Shoot things, do things. But I feel like this was just such a natural extension of shooting stuff and interacting with the world that like, I can't believe it took this long for someone to come up with it. I've never been super into like, how they call it power wash porn or whatever. I've never really been into that.
Yeah.
Like, because I do it. It's a chore for me. I hate it. But there's something about the game version of it that is just so much fun. There's lore. There's like a game world. You're like learning about it as you're, power washing away everything. There's all this like little game stuff coming through. Um, Being able like to kind of like do that thing on the fly where it's, do I want a wider one? Do I want the higher pressure one? Do I need to use soap on this? It's been great. I mean, I think it's got a 10 out of 10 on Steam, which I think is
It's overwhelmingly positive, which is the
Yeah.
highest like community rating you can get.
But it's kind of like that. It's the Germans, right, that are super into like those hardcore simmy games, right? Like where they'll like drive a truck, like they'll go home from work and then just drive a truck for hours or whatever. I think this is kind of the future though of like these type of sim games. It's just a very narrow, specific thing. And I was thinking, I was like, what if this ends up being like the Square Enix hit of the year?
I mean, it might be, since
It
they
might be, right?
sold off most of their Western properties. And
So
I guess they published this one. It's actually a British game. It's made by a
Mhm.
British studio called Future Lab. So I guess they kept this one European property. So I
I
guess
just
it's their big
imagine
hit now.
like, yeah, exactly. We're like, oh, is this what the people wanted? All along we were making all these like complicated Hitmans and Tomb Raiders, and then all along people just wanted to go outside and pressure wash. It's fun though. There's a lot of stages to it. I haven't tackled any of the challenge modes yet. The challenge modes look really cool. I'm not quite there yet. I think I am actually on, if not the last level, very, 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 very close to the last level. Um, I think
So
I've probably done most levels once or twice too. But it's really enjoyable. It's a cozy game. You pop it on, you pop a movie on. I've actually been watching a lot of Evil as I've been playing Power Watch Simulator, kind of keep my like my chi balanced or whatever. But it's been good. It's been good summerish type game. So yeah, if you're into weird simmy indie but actually published by Square Enix games, give it a shot. I think it's free on Game Pass. That's how I got it. But I know a lot of people are buying it on Steam because it's got crazy, crazy high reviews on Steam.
it is currently 33.49 Canadian on Steam. I don't know
Oh, baby. It's
how
like
to do
25
the.
bucks.
Yeah, it'd be around that American, I think. I forget currency conversions. But yeah, it's pretty good deal for, you know, shooting things with a water gun essentially. So just for my own benefit, are the challenges timed? How do they
Oh,
add
okay. So
difficulty to
there's
this?
yeah. So you do the mission and then it unlocks the challenge mode for it. One is timed, which how fast can you do it. The other one is interesting. It's how much water do you use,
Oh, so
right?
it's like resource management.
Right, right. So like you don't want to just go in guns blazing. You want to think about the stream pressure and the width and all that kind of stuff, and really kind of start top to bottom on something. Um, Especially when you're kind of like going through like the angles, right? Because you can only flip the nozzle horizontal or vertical, right? And then there's also this mode you can do. It's like up on the D-pad where you stand still, but you, instead of like moving left and right, you move the hose left and right, or like the stream left and right, which is really good if you're getting into some of those tight areas, because each mission is kind of a little different, right? So like there's one, let's say like you're washing a subway station. It's big areas and you're having to do the majority of it, but once you get about 99% of a wall or a surface clean, it just auto completes the rest for you, right? The problem is more like the smaller items. So like if you're pressure washing, say like a motorcycle, you've got to get the individual spokes on a tire for it to auto complete for you, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so like sometimes you're literally like hiding underneath a car looking for like one angle of dirt, and you've got like a dirt vision button. Like if you push it, the
That's
dirt kind of like
amazing.
strobes. So you're like under the car looking like frantically hitting the button, like, come on, I know it's dirty still. Trying to find the one spot so you can just spray it and move on. But it does a very good job of giving you different tools and keeping kind of the the modes running. I think it's hard to explain. Like, um, for every motorcycle, there's a UFO, or for every like subway area, there's an RV. So it doesn't feel like you're constantly having to deal with super big, overwhelming ones, because I get the kind of the vibe is like, oh, this is an easy one, but it's only going to pay me $500. So I'm going to get this one done and then move on to the next one. Versus, wow, this is almost too overwhelming. Where do I start? But then you chop it up into little sections, right? And that's enjoyable on its own. I gotta say, one thing, this is maybe a crazy selling point for the Xbox. One thing that makes this game even better for me on the Xbox is the quick resume, right? Because I'll do 15, 20 minutes of power washing, go do whatever I'm going to do, come back, and it's just boom, right back into it. That's a good feeling. And that quick resume hits different games differently. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that this one is a very good selling point for quick resume.
Yeah, it does sound like the kind of thing where like, okay, I left. It's kind of like, um, almost like it. This is going to be a weird analogy, almost like work. Like you
Hmm.
take your lunch break and you come back and you want to be right where you left off. It reminds me a bit of that.
Right.
Um, the other thing that I thought was really interesting was the challenge modes, where you mentioned that one of them was timed and one of them was water management.
Hmm.
It's almost like there's a speed run mode and I guess like a
Like
survival
built in.
horror mode almost, like with the limited resources. That
The
to me is
dirt.
so cool that they've
The dirt.
repurposed the mechanics in those ways.
Yeah, so it's a well thought out game. I mean, even as those sim type games go, it's well thought out. It feels like the kind of game that they're constantly evolving in, and I do mean it. There is a pretty interesting lore kind of going on. You're in a city that's next to a volcano that's erupting, and there's ash over everything, and you slowly find out that there's like an ancient god, and you have to clean his statues and his temples. Their cats are all missing. That's another thing. There's a lot going on there for such a little, kind of out of nowhere little game that hit just at the right time for me.
Yeah, it's a game that I never thought I'd be interested in, but I'm seriously considering picking it up. So good on Future Lab and Square Enix for putting this out there.
Yeah.
All right, Waffles, what have you been playing?
A little bit of everything right now, but mostly Hades.
Mm.
I finally hit the point in Hades where I have all of the story done, and it's just like meat and potatoes. Get through it, get as high as you can, get as fast as you can, get as many uh, complications to it as you can. And I'm kind of trying to play through as hard as I can while I still have the motor skills, because I know as soon as I set it down, I'm probably not going to pick it up again for a long time. And this is a game that rewards motor skills more than most, you know.
What's your go-to weapon?
Mine is the shield.
Mm.
I really like the shield, especially uh, the second mode. I think I can't think of the name of the god. Oh, it's Chaos. Yeah, it's Chaos's shield that splits into multiple shields when you throw it. I just, for some reason, that weapon has really stuck with me. And that's where my highest heat is right now with that. I think I'm up to 10 now, 10 heat
Nice.
with
Oh
that.
dear God!
Yeah.
Wow.
You've been at it.
Congrats.
Yeah, I don't normally stick with a game this long post ending. So it's been really interesting how well this has stuck with me and how much I'm really enjoying the grind. And that's another thing wouldn't normally tell you. Like, I've dropped a lot of Final Fantasy games because the grind gets to me, and this one is just, there was something about the art and the music and the style, and just I feel like I've kind of cracked open how the game works, how many rooms I should expect to see before I see a mini boss, what sort of extras I can pick up on the fly. It's starting to feel really smooth.
So it's really like sunk its claws into you.
Yeah.
Like I know games, some like sometimes I'll pick one up and then I'll just play it for months because like there's something about the mechanics or the vibe of the game that
Mhm.
really makes again its hooks into me. So it's I'm glad to hear that you're super interested in this one.
Yeah, I think this is the first roguelike that I've really gotten into in any way also, which it is such an outlier game for me, and yet I can't put it down. I've been playing it for months now.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people that
Same.
they don't typically like roguelikes, but they started playing Hades and they absolutely loved it. So I mean, I've
I
never actually played Hades. It's one of those things
I
that
think
I want to play eventually, but just haven't had time for yet. But I keep hearing these amazing things about it, and I definitely want to give it a go.
I think the reason why, and I'm also counting myself there as someone who just doesn't really have a lot of time for roguelikes, but has a lot of time for Hades. I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of reasons, far and away being that the gameplay is exquisite, the story is great, the characters are incredible, but it's I think it's just the fact that like it's balanced perfectly for how much of a roguelike you want it to be. Like the story is involved enough that you can keep going just for that.
Yeah. And I like how they've really incorporated all of the elements of the roguelike into it as just like sort of natural consequences of the world you're in. None of it feels forced for game design reasons. It all just feels like it clicks together really naturally.
That's a really hard feat for a game to pull off, and when it does,
Yeah.
it's like chef's kiss, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Supergiant, I think that's maybe their specialty is the feel of a game. Wouldn't you think? I mean, like,
Yeah.
I think that's really they understand so much. Even Pyre, which was kind of their black sheep game. I don't know if I like kind of the one that doesn't fit in with the rest. It still feels really cool, like the mechanics of it. I don't know anybody who didn't like that, but Bastion definitely had a lot going on. It felt like a very cool type game just to even just be in the world. That narrator added a lot for sure, but yeah, I think Supergiant's a really, really, really cool studio. Just to kind of see where they go from here. Um, you know, I'm betting they've got that budget now to really kind of do whatever they want.
Yeah, they've been fairly, I mean, all of their games have been critical and commercial successes to varying degrees. So I'm really interested to see what they do for their fifth game.
Hmm.
Uh,
They haven't
and
announced anything, have they?
no,
No.
But it's not too far off from when they should.
Mm.
Like they release a game roughly every few years. Hades has been, out for a while, but it was also in early access long enough that it's still been a while. Like, yeah.
Or is it a little surprising you think they didn't release any DLC or like
Well,
add-ons for Hades for?
I don't think they needed to.
Yeah.
Like, and also it was like I said, Hades was in early access for a long time. The version that like 90% of all of us played was just the version that came after that. Um,
so yeah,
so
it felt complete, I
yeah,
guess.
It's just when a game wins every game of the year award for an entire year, and it was a slow year anyway. Just kind of
I don't
weird
think they.
weird to move on.
I think It's also like they're a company that doesn't like the idea of feeling like you do DLC because you have to, or that its success demands or merits it. Like they did it. They're very proud. Now it's time to the next game with only one word in the title that's incredibly popular.
The one thing I think I'm gonna miss about Supergiant getting so big is they used to have this little tiny booth at PAX. It was maybe 4 gaming consoles back in the day, and you just literally sit there and they're like, "Hey, what's up? I'm the lead programmer on this game. You want to give it a whirl?" You just sit there and play, and they were so relaxed and just calm about everything and walk you through their game. They were like, it always felt like they were really proud of their games, which they should be. I don't mean that in a bad way, but a lot of other you always kind of remember the developers at PAX that sit down with you and play the game and they really feel proud of what they've done. Off the top of my head, like they were the clear far and away number one. The Castle Crasher guys, they were always the same. And the State of Decay team, back when they were, I think before they were bought out by Microsoft, they used to have their own booth. Now they're probably part of Microsoft, but they were always very, very proud of their stuff. And they just sit there and let you play as long as you want. They get excited when you do things, and it's a cool feeling to see people do that. So I hope Supergiant keeps it going because everybody seems to love Hades. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really I've you know what? Confession time. I've never actually played a Supergiant game. I have uh, Bastion and Transistor in my backlog, and I just haven't had time to fire them up yet. But I'm so excited to finally try one and to see what the studio comes up with next. Uh,
The
Wolfman, sorry, go ahead. You were going to say
I was
something
just gonna
actually?
say that one of the best things about not playing a Supergiant game is that it's always the right time to play a Supergiant game for the first time.
Absolutely. I mean, um, I would play a Supergiant game, but I don't have time right now because I'm busy playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which I believe you are also
Oh,
playing, Wolfman Jew.
yeah, yes, I am. Okay, so let me just figure out the best way to say this. So, since this podcast started, or at least in the few years after it started, there's a few games that we've kind of homed in on as our turf, right? Um, Persona 5, Destiny 2, the the conflagration of all that is Sonic the Hedgehog. Um, and one of the big ones has been Xenoblade Chronicles, this incredibly impossible series from Nintendo of in which a company that started by making a incredibly inscrutable Final Fantasy-esque spin-off thing went into now making games that sell millions of copies so that they can also work on Zelda games. Um, so while I've played through all the Xenoblade games, albeit I've only played a little bit of X, the weird one for the Wii U. So it's sorry, I'm not sure exactly what I'm trying to say here, but
Well, I think just to step in here for a sec, I think
sure.
like to bounce off that point, this is the Xenoblade games are very non-Nintendo games for Nintendo games, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
They're very different from most of Nintendo's first party output. When you think of Nintendo games, you think of these very ludically focused, very highly polished experiences that have almost like these toyetic elements to them.
Yeah.
And Xenoblade
And if there are,
Chronicles is not that.
yeah,
It's
it's
like these sprawling, epic, very narrative focused JRPGs that are a little bit rough around the edges, that have these super complicated mechanics and battle systems, but also
all
these like
for,
incredibly gorgeous and alien worlds that are just like unlike anything else in video games.
yeah. But it's also that they have these like mammoth stories in these worlds that are giant, but also designed in a way that you don't really need to explore more than a sliver of them.
Yeah, like they're
It,
designed to be almost like you're only seeing a portion of the entire world that would be otherwise laid out for you.
Let me ask you both something because I didn't make I didn't make the leap from what was the one with Cosmos. So
Xenosaga.
They all
yes, I
have
never made the.
Cosmos, but
Oh, they
I
do.
think yeah, Xenosaga is the one that originally featured her, I believe.
So I never made the leap from Saga to Chronicles or Blade, whatever the cool name
It
everybody
it
calls it.
is Xenosaga to Xenoblade.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that it's because other games are doing similar things like Nier and stuff
I
like
mean,
that,
I
or
don't
is it?
even
No game
yeah.
does anything really similar. I mean, maybe that's overselling it,
Mm.
but it's pretty unique in the JRPG space. I think
It's
part of the problem is that I don't think it was always able to fully successfully execute on its vision until maybe now. Um, but yeah, it's quite different from other JRPGs out there.
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of like it's a JRPG, but the most like inscrutable kind of JRPG. It's an open world game, but like an absolutely mammoth and bizarrely structured open world game. It's like it really is very different, even as it holds a bunch of stuff from other popular genres.
I would
When
say it's so just to be clear, I mean Xenoblade Chronicles X is open world.
oh
Xenoblade
yeah,
Chronicles
fair enough.
3 has like these huge interlinked open areas. So I
They're
I describe it more like
sandboxes.
yeah, they're sandbox. I describe it more like Dragon Age Inquisition, that kind of setup. But yeah, there are these big open areas for sure.
Yeah, they're not. It's not an open world game in the sense that like it's not one open world. It is multiple sandboxes, but these are absurdly sized sandboxes. These games are all set on the backs of dead or dying or living monsters, and their like bones become the space of in which entire kingdoms rise and fall. It's
Yeah, so just like to explain the joke in the intro, uh, one level in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has you literally playing inside the digestive tract of a giant monster. Like someone built a city there,
yeah,
and the lakes are like pools of stomach acid, I guess.
yeah, but it's not. But not like they don't hurt you.
Yeah, it's like
It's just
benign stomach acid.
yeah. It's the trees the forests are just giant bioluminescent like I guess fungi that look like trees.
Yeah,
Um
it's pretty imaginative.
yeah.
So on 3 in particular, where are you right now in the game?
Okay, I'm pretty sure I'm nearing the end of chapter 4. I'm in the fourth major region. Um
Oh wow, you are way ahead of me. I am a couple of hours into chapter 3.
okay, cool. So you have yeah. Okay, I actually don't even remember where that is by that point. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Um
I've met Ethel and we've hung out.
oh, fair enough. Got it. That helps. Um So Xenoblade 1 came out in 2010. It came out in 2012 in outside of Japan for after the weird Operation Rainfall, a kind of fan campaign to get a number of Wii era JRPGs brought out into other languages.
Yeah.
So with that weird thing of like even Nintendo didn't want to bother translating it, it's into now this thing that's selling millions of copies and yeah, and its characters now get to go fight the Smash Brothers and whatever. Like these are it's kind of this very weird trajectory for a series like this where you literally have people fighting on the backs of giant monsters and like screaming about how they're going to rewrite reality. Like it's all stuff you've seen. It's just done in a way that's extremely weird.
Yeah, it's almost like how do I put this? It has all of that JRPG stuff, but with a tone that's very different from most JRPGs,
It's
especially
darker.
yeah, especially Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is a lot more somber and a lot more reflective, and I would even say less chatty than most
Um,
JRPGs.
I had a conversation about this a while ago with another person from the show, who's been on the show, Lovely Bones, and we were talking about it's not about Xenoblade, it's about Fire Emblem specifically, and how we were kind of thinking about like the way how like in Fire like Magic and Fire Emblem, another Nintendo series about like anime people fighting in political battles, and how it there's a map in Fire Emblem, one of the Fire Emblem games, that has ghost soldiers on it, and it kind of rubbed us the wrong way for different reasons. For me specifically, it was the whole idea of there being ghost soldiers in Fire Emblem, which is a series that has magic and has like fantastical elements and it has dragons and gods, but it's very weird to have this idea of okay, there actually is an afterlife that feels like it changes things significantly.
Right, because permadeath is a part of that
Yeah,
series.
exactly. Yeah. Um, and and similarly, like because it's also it's tonally right. It's weird and darker and more serious and severe a lot of the time, and Xenoblade takes that to like a much wilder direction. That frequently have you fighting in war in like basically like racial conflicts or massive wars amid like inevitable and imminent climate death and uh it's just weird. It's just weird to like know this and know that this is still like ultimately just as Nintendo as anything else. But um anyway, so I've come
So
into this series.
yeah,
Oh, sorry. I was
So-
just going to actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to now actually get into like what distinguishes 3, maybe,
Yeah, absolutely.
because
That's
feel
the
like-
interesting bit.
yeah, because I've been talking about this way too long and I haven't even gotten to the actual game. 3, which just came out. This is the first time I've ever been playing any of these games at launch, which feels special and exciting. But 3 is 1 is set on the back of 2 dead giants. And the 2 giants were, fought in this endless war, died, and now the creatures that lived and evolved on their bodies are now fighting the same wars. Xenoblade 2 is set on the backs of living giant active monsters whose needs and whims are either, supported by the people who call them home, or are kind of like turned into workhorses for their denizens.
Gee, I wonder if there's a metaphor there.
Yeah, this is not these are not very subtle games.
Yeah.
Even by the standards of the JRPG. And these are set in different worlds, although in a way where the stuff kind of connects in different ways. That's a little more complicated than that. But the idea is that ostensibly these are set in unique settings. 3 I'm going to guess that the same is true with 3, both thematically and literally, because we're in a world that is essentially appears to be almost like a graveyard for the creatures, but also for the level design tropes and aesthetics of both Xenoblade 1 and 2. You have like the very cover shows that one of the giants from Xenoblade 2, the one that you go inside with the stomach acids, that you see its corpse, like it's hollowed out, complete desiccated corpse. And it's right next to a sword from Xenoblade that formed an entire like region in Xenoblade 1. There are bodies, there are enemies, there are a lot of the different races from 1 and 2 appear to have lived on in odd ways into the denizens. I haven't really done a full count yet, but I feel like there's 2 sides to this conflict, one of which seems to have aggressive ties to Xenoblade 1, and the other which has to have aggressive ties to Xenoblade 2, but not in ways that have become fully clear yet. Just they're in my head, and I'm trying to keep note.
So would you say this would be good for someone who hasn't played before, or would you really want to start with 1 and go from there?
That's the thing, Waffle. I don't know.
Okay.
So
I actually don't know. This is like the
all
part where
all the reviews I've read say you can safely go into this not having played the first 2. You might get a little bit more out of it having played the first 2, just lore-wise, but the plot will make complete sense to the extent that any JRPG plot can make complete sense, having not played the first 2 games.
Yeah, this is also true with Xenoblade 2, where like it is set, like I said, it is set in a different reality, it is set in a different continuity, but at the end you do discover that it has genuine extreme connections to Xenoblade 1 in ways that are very exciting if you played Xenoblade 1.
And very confusing if you hadn't, like I had at the time, that I went back and played the first Xenoblade game.
But I don't honestly know. I guess to answer, to give you a more definitive answer, Waffle, I think that I would probably suggest to play Xenoblade 1 or 2 first. That you can still go into 3 completely fine, but you will get more out of it. The only thing is that, insanely, Xenoblade 2 is currently out of print.
Wait,
Of
what?
course.
That's messed
Yeah.
up.
It hopefully that will not be the case soon, because that's a very large game.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to, occupy another 18 gigs on your Switch with one game, but you can always download it if that's
Yeah.
your bag.
But yeah, it's so the story in general I like of this. The general world I am enjoying a lot. Xenoblade 1 was a game about people who are kind of like eking out a society and eking out a life and kind of feeling threatened and being threatened and having to go like fight that back and fight this like all-powerful enemy, only to realize the limits of their own world, of their opposing sides' world's views. And Xenoblade 2 was kind of not dissimilar. It was about, a ragtag band of people who have been who for whatever reason are escaping this kind of weird and abusive society of like what is essentially like slave ownership, in order to try to go to the top of the world. It's very weird, but there's this. Both of these games do this thing where it's like very complicated and inscrutable, but they also have like very core and I think easily identifiable things.
So let's get to Xenoblade 3.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Where you want to handle this then?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just to really briefly explain the plot here. So it's set in a world where two nations, Agnes and Kevis, have been at war for as long as anyone can remember. But the special thing about this war is that it's fought entirely by child soldiers. People are effectively born into this world at age 10 out of, I guess, tubes, and then they automatically die the second they either they die in war or they die the second they turn 20. And they have to keep fighting this war to essentially power up their kingdom, because if they don't keep fighting and they don't kill enough of the opposing side, then the kingdom will effectively lose power and shut down. So they're locked in this perpetual war until three soldiers from each side are sent on a special recon mission. And due to some strange events that transpire, end up having to work together and realize that they want to break free of this perpetual war. And so they're on a mission to both run away from both sides that are now trying to kill them, while also freeing both sides from this perpetual war.
Yeah. It's a road trip.
Yeah.
Albeit one that you can like warp back to, because there's because as much as like as these games are designed, like the vast majority of content is largely completely optional, but absolutely mammoth in size and amount, which is why it's complete. You can absolutely just go on the main quest, or you can actively go and try to rescue and liberate these different colonies from both sides.
Yeah. And so I think the last thing we kind of want to mention about Xenoblade is the combat. So Wolfman, can you kind of explain how this combat system is set up?
I gave you the easy one, but fair enough. So Xenoblade games are essentially like JRPG versions of a Western MMO. You have a party in the first game it's 3, in the second game it's 3/9, in this one it's 6 to 7, and you're basically arrayed against whatever enemies attack you or whichever enemies you decide to attack. You all surround the enemies. You auto attack. As you auto attack, that fills up. As you auto attack, or as you just continue the battle, you get moves that are called arts, which are kind of your special attacks. When you want to chain together your arts in various ways to like chain damages, to unleash status effects, to heal your party members, to use greater attacks, and then to form elaborate chain attacks. Weirdly enough, once you get into the groove of it, it's honestly not that difficult.
Yeah, on the regular battles, I can just stand there and my party will dispatch the enemies because I'm a little bit over leveled right now.
Yes. Oh yeah, that is a problem. Over leveling is a genuine issue in this game.
It's actually a pretty bad problem to have later on because you unlock new classes. So this game has a job system where over the course of the game you keep unlocking new jobs or classes, but the only way to get your entire party to learn a new class is by fighting enemies that aren't too many levels below you. Otherwise, they won't be able to learn the class. So you have to be a little careful and not over leveling too far, or you won't, or only one member of your party will be able to learn each new class.
Yeah, this is an issue. Early on, I was like, I didn't realize that the points for class leveling scale with the points for experience. So I was like, okay, I'll just wait till everyone's maxed out their classes and then move on. And then, oh wait, no, no, you can't do
Yeah.
that.
So
That
how far out would you have to plan a run then? I mean, you'd probably.
well, actually, I mean, there are actually like ways to get around this. There are items that can artificially increase your level, artificially but permanently increase your level. They are, as far as I can tell, they are complete. They are limited. There is not an infinite number of them. There's only a set number of them in one game, but there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And you don't really need to like. The truth is, you don't actually need to like max out every class or even most of the classes.
Yeah,
You're,
the
you're
only real perk to maxing out a class is being able to change that outfit whenever you want. Otherwise, there's no like additional. Well, is there additional perk? I think you unlock a certain
yes.
skill that you can
Fashion
use.
You unlock, yeah.
dysfunction. It's very important.
Yeah,
You unlock, I believe, the optional skills and optional moves,
right.
optional like special attacks.
And
But
then you can equip
ultimately,
them. Yeah, so like this whole idea of duality and bringing together these two worlds is even reflected in the combat system,
yeah,
where if you're playing as a Kavesi character, have only Kavesi arts. If you're playing as an Agnian character, you start with only Agnian arts, but then um, you can learn special arts from the other side of the conflict, and those become the other additional moves that you can add in optionally to your arsenal. And
So it's kind of
so
like
that
a blue mage system from Final Fantasy.
I don't
Like
know
you
what
have to
that
fight
is, but
them
I'm
to
going to
learn.
say yes, exactly
Oh
like
gosh,
that.
right.
you also have other ways that the themes are included. Is that you get bonus heroes, and almost all of whom so far I've unlocked. I think like somewhere between like 7 and 10 of them. Almost all of them are the commanders of the colonies you liberate, so you get additional leaders of each like group by your side, and you can also fuse some of the characters can fuse with the people of the other side of your heroes, like
Oh yeah,
literally.
we didn't even talk about the mechs. There are mechs in this
So
game. I guess they're
when we're
biomechs. I don't know what you'd call them. Um,
when
Uh,
we're fusing, is it literally like
it's
combining two into one, or
oh
is
yeah,
it
yeah,
like
yeah. Like
Yeah,
two
no, it's
people combine into a magical mech.
yeah.
oh, okay,
Um,
like
And
blood
then
does.
some of the villains also combine into magical mechs.
yeah, it's like it's very Darling in the Franxx, except for not terrible. So yeah, it's a game that's chock full of content, chock full of ideas. Um, Wolfman could probably speak to a little bit better to it because he's farther in it. Um, how are you enjoying it so far?
I am like honestly having a great time. It's really nice that, but like it was great having a month of just being super obsessed with Elden Ring on top of the Kingdom Hearts stuff I had to do. But like, it's genuinely just nice to just be sinking myself into another game again.
Oh, it's just RPG to RPG though. That is,
Yeah, it gets
you
to
gotta
be
be
a
enjoying
lot.
it. Yeah,
Like,
It's
it's
well, I
such a
mean,
year for RPGs, though.
yeah.
yeah, Elden Ring, Pokemon Legends, Xenoblade. I'm sure I'm missing a few.
Oh yeah, and upcoming there's Soul Hackers 2, Harvestella, Dowville Chronicle, Valkyrie Elysium. It's a crazy year, man. Um, for RPGs. So yeah, that is Xenoblade Chronicles 3, a game that Wolfman's been enjoying, that I've been enjoying, and I think is going to be one of my favorite games of the year if it can keep up the quality. But I would like to talk about a game that is the opposite of a game that I've been enjoying, which is Silt, a game that I finished last night. I finished it. I plowed through the end just so I could talk about the game on this podcast. Um, well, okay. I normally don't like talking about games I don't like. Like part of the reason we've done this podcast for, gosh, 6 years now, is because I love talking about games that I enjoy and then like browbeating people into playing the games I like. And like if this podcast does anything, I hope it encourages people to play some of the more obscure titles or titles you might have overlooked that we talk about here. This is not that. I am telling you not to play this game. Um, Silt is, to sum it up in a few words, what if we took Limbo or Inside and put it underwater? That sounds pretty good on paper, right? It sounds like it could be a good plan.
Inoffensive is the word that comes to mind here.
Yeah, inoffensive. Like at worst, you think, okay, it's going to be mediocre, it's going to be generic. And to this game's credit, the artwork is just absolutely gorgeous. It's got a little bit of that ink pen kind of quality to it, and it's all done in grayscale with great use of lighting and shadow. Great from an artistic perspective, not from a gameplay perspective, which I'll get to in a little bit. Um, and it's really great at creating this sense of uh, like otherworldly dread almost, and limbo-esque horror. And that is pretty much all that's nice that I can say about it, uh, because almost everything else about this game is awful. And I am so disappointed to have to say this because I was looking so forward to this game. Like Kappa will say this. This game has Merve written all over it, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm looking at it, and this is. I'm surprised we're getting a pan here. I'm ready for game of the year talk with this thing and you.
Oh no. It's I think it's almost worse when a game you think you're gonna love disappoints you. But it's not just disappointing. This game is just bad. So in order to explain why it's bad, it's got the same kind of structure as a puzzle platformer, but you're underwater the whole time. You're
Ooh,
swimming.
yeah, that control.
Yeah. So puzzle platformers don't rely that much on platforming skill, but they do rely a little bit. Like you
Mhm.
need to be able to manipulate a character. It's generally possible to miss a jump, etc. When you have that kind of timing and skill requirement for something that's underwater, where the movement is very sludgy and imprecise, that is a horrible fit.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me pitch this to you. So I see this kind of game almost like Limbo and a bunch of there's been a million Limbo type knockoffs, right? Is it more about let's just create a mood or a vibe for a game and then whatever happens in it, we don't really care as far as gameplay or anything else. We just think people are going to be into this game because of the mood, maybe? Like I don't know how
I,
to describe
I,
it.
I mean, I think Limbo was a lot more than just the mood. It was the mood, but it was also the fact that the puzzles were good, the pace was strong. Like
yeah,
it,
I would characterize it as people thinking that Limbo or Inside are just the surface elements of those games, the mood, the tone, the
Hmm.
oppressive atmosphere, and not understanding what made those games tick.
Right, right. Yeah,
So
that's what I'm kind of trying to get at. Like you say, well, let's run with this feel, but then they don't know what to do once they're inside of that.
that
How do we
feel.
make this a game? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the problem with this game. It knows how Limbo creates mood and tone, but it doesn't know how to do any of that to make a compelling game. So one of the problems with the controls is that sometimes because the controls are so poor, you can't you might have solved the puzzle properly, but you can't tell because you can't execute the solution.
You might just be like swimming in the wrong spot or something, right?
Yeah,
Is
like some of the precision requirements of this game are so ridiculous. It's almost Souls-like in how precise they need you to be. Like there's one section I played last night where I think I must have tried it 50 or 60 times and I just wasn't getting the timing right. I had the solution completely correct. I just couldn't execute the timing.
mm.
And like you can't have timing requirements that tight in a game like this.
What are you
Be-
planning on?
I was playing it on Switch, which
Okay.
was, I guess, a little bit of a mistake, not because it runs poorly, but because it doesn't work that well on the small screen. So
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe that was my problem with it. So last night I put it up on the big TV, and it was, if anything, worse because now the lighting didn't work as well on the big TV. Like, I couldn't
Yeah,
tell
imagine like
sometimes.
HDR would be like, well, I mean, too, I better hope you don't have drift on your Joy-Con
Oh,
too,
no, no, no.
because
These are fairly new Joy-Cons. So it
yeah,
wasn't
but I'm
like,
saying with the controls, like a swimming control and
yeah,
Joy-Con drift would be,
It sounds like a bad
oof.
combo.
Yeah, right.
yeah, it
Like,
would be. Um,
wandering, floating in a direction.
yeah, so like, and the problem with dying repeatedly, right, is that it just ruins all the tension. It just sucks
Hmm.
all the, like, because if you know you're going to keep, like, everything in this game, it kills you in the same way. It either mauls you or eats you, right? And if you
No,
once you've been eaten by the 300th underwater worm, you just stop caring. Like, it just
it,
doesn't matter
yeah.
anymore.
This is something, not to put too fine a point on it, but Limbo and Inside did fairly much better on that mark.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
Like, you would
structurally,
die if you did something
yeah.
stupid, but you weren't dying constantly. The
Well,
death
also
is
you
like, it creates tension
Well, it
effectively.
was also the death was itself something exciting. Like in Limbo, it's very well structured, right? Like you're in the forest where you then see like there's some stuff, then there is the spider, then there is the village of the children you have to murder before they murder you. This is a creepy Eastern European horror game, not a like
It's Western
serial killer
European, it's Dutch,
simulator.
I believe. But yeah,
Oh,
um,
yeah, but
Does the aesthetic fight the game, like as far as like the puzzles go too? Like,
a
I don't
little
know how to
bit.
describe.
There's some places that where you can't tell what's part of the interactable environment or what's like a
Right.
wall. And so sometimes you'll just like bonk swimming into something because you think it's something you can swim over. Um, and one of the things that Limbo and Inside did so effectively is how they deployed dark humor. Right?
Right.
Inside is kind of a funny game. I legitimately chuckled a few times playing that game. This game has none of that. It's
Mm.
just
there.
so serious, but serious in a way that doesn't mean anything. Like, there's no greater meaning in this game. It's all entirely abstract in a very sophomoric way where they have symbolism, but it's symbolism that means nothing. So it just ends up being empty. I don't know. I think I've ragged on this game way too much for what it is, which is an indie game that tried to do something and failed. Um, so yeah, don't play Silt. So far, my least favorite game of the year. Uh,
We'll have to remember that come.
oh
The
yeah,
reason I
this
was
is
asking.
definitely getting mentioned on the end of year podcast. But I got all of it out of my system now, so I won't be as angry in December.
The reason
Okay,
that. Go ahead.
so it's not going to get a if I may be so bold, it's not going to get a Peely Award
Oh no, it
nomination.
will get a Peely. It will get. I will push hard for this to get a Peely because this game is awful. It's one of the worst games I've played in the past 5 years. Not the worst game I've played this. It's the worst game of 2022 that I've played, but not the worst game I've played this year because I played a game from last year this year, which was even worse. That was The Good Life. It made me swear off sweary games. Um, and I'm
The
actually
reason I was
going to end up talking about The Good Life later, so that was a bit of foreshadowing. Um,
The
but
reason I was asking about the aesthetic though is because so many puzzle games rely on clues, right?
yeah,
Like just to avoid being frustrating. The yellow doors are always the exit, or so sometimes when you're doing that really black and white aesthetic, especially with like a floaty type of world, I could just imagine, like you were saying, just what do I even need to do in this room? Sometimes feels like something to figure out, and that's not really fun in a puzzle game.
yeah.
um, if you're
So,
always on the hunt for what to do.
so just to describe this game a little bit more and actually explain how the aesthetic works into it. Um, you know how people make fun of the Uncharted games kind of highlighted handholds?
Yeah, yeah, climb yellow. Yeah.
Yeah, this game has the exact opposite problem. Um, the art design tells you nothing about
Yeah.
how to interact with the world until you go into a mode, which is the main mechanic of the game, which is possessing other creatures to do to solve puzzles. So it's kind of like
So-
Super Mario Odyssey.
Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, you possess. Imagine Mario Odyssey, but 2D and awful,
Huh.
and entirely underwater.
Yeah.
So it's like the Lake Kingdom, but crappy. So you possess other creatures and you use their powers to solve puzzles. And when you go into the possession mode, by the way, the little possession tendril you get to snake your way to other characters, almost impossible to control. Never got the hang of it in the entire time I spent with it. Awful mechanic. I don't know why they implemented it this way. Um,
Hmm.
but anyway, you possess these characters, and possessible characters get a little bit highlighted when you go into that mode with your little possession tendril, but the whole world slightly appears like a little bit brighter. So sometimes, even from that mode, it's not clear what you can and can't possess.
Yeah.
So they've just messed up pretty much everything they could have messed up about this game. I don't know. I'm probably just really bitter because I forced myself through it with a guide. I actually used a
There we
guide to
go.
help me with some of the puzzles because I got tired of it. And that is exactly what we wanted to talk about today: guides and walkthroughs in video games. So, walkthroughs and guides have been around for almost as long as video games. That's probably not true. First, there was your annoying roommate who sat on the couch next to you and backseat gamed while you were trying to play Final Fantasy. And then we replaced that annoying roommate with books that told us exactly what we needed to do at various points in the game. It's like having an annoying roommate that you consult at your own leisure. So, walkthroughs and guides have been part of gaming for a long time. And just to kind of kick this off, I wanted to know if you folks have ever consulted one. I mean, you probably
Yes.
have.
Oh yes.
That's definitely that's going to be a yes all around. So, what was one time when you consulted one?
Um, just this year, I regularly used a guide for Return to the Obra Dinn, which was one of the best gaming experiences I've had this year, and it's one of my favorite games of 2018. But like, it's really hard. There are some puzzles that, yeah, do kind of require you to know what 19th century French maritime outfits look like.
Yeah, for me it was I remember when I was playing Samurai Warriors Spirit of Sonata. I really enjoyed the game, but there are so many Samurai Warriors always have that do this thing and then do this thing and then do this thing and then you can do this thing. And finding those out just by pure happenstance is probably impossible. I do think there are definitely some games that come out now that are designed to be, go look at a walkthrough or a video or something like that, because no way are half these things being found out otherwise. But yeah, that was one where I kind of extensively, followed along with guides just to unlock a lot of the different things that I needed to, or wanted to unlock.
Most recently for me, it was Kirby and the Forgotten Land. There were a couple of blueprints that I couldn't find, and it was one of those where I probably could have just kept grinding at it, but it wasn't worth it to me to grind at it, so I just looked it up.
Yeah, there's one that I looked up when I was playing through that game, and then I hit myself because like, oh, I really should have known that. But
Yeah.
it was, but yeah, I was like, I've already spent a couple of hours looking for this. I should probably just look it up, and then I did, and it had the power it gave me. Um,
Uh, just out of curiosity, do you either of you remember that power specifically?
uh, I don't remember which power it was, but it was the one that was located in the fair. In
Okay.
the like the fairground one with the parades. There's a door
Okay.
that I interacted with, but apparently didn't interact with enough. So that's why I missed it.
Mine was one in the one of the later levels, and I think it was the power up for the. It was like 2 or 3 for Spark, like the Time Spark one, maybe.
Oh yeah,
It was literally just like behind a ledge that I hadn't gone behind. Um, but I had been through that level like 6 or 7 times and not seen anything. And I was getting that angry, kind of frustrated where I was like, I either need to look it up or stop playing.
Yeah. And after a point, there, like, the whatever feeling of pride you get for beating something like without a guide, like that pride goes away very quickly, I think, the less you get from middle school.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always try to gauge my reaction to finding something out when I look it up in a walkthrough. Like a lot of times it's like, how could they have possibly expected anyone to know that? And sometimes it's like, oh, I'm so dumb. How did I miss that? So there's such like a little, like somewhere in between there is probably the right answer. Like, okay, this was difficult. If I would have kept at it, I probably would have eventually found it, but I needed to move on. But I usually seem to have one of those two extremes. It's just, this is ridiculous. No one ever. And then on the other end, it's, okay, well, yeah, maybe I should have looked a little harder, I guess.
When I was going through Kingdom Hearts this year for the series, there was a certain point where people on the avocado were very blunt to me. You need to get the good ending because you need to actually see the true ending because it's plot relevant to the other games, which, setting aside the fact that that's bullshit and will always
You can look
be
it up on
bullshit.
YouTube if you really need to, right?
And well, no, it's also just I eventually was doing that, but for Kingdom Hearts 3, the actual requirements from getting the bad ending to the bad but much more hilariously complicated ending is that you had to find and take a selfie with a number of like Mickey Mouse emblems throughout all the various worlds of the game, and that was really fun. So I basically went out of my way to not look up guides because it was really fun to do that. And then when I eventually got the required amount and then ended the game, I actually did look up which ones I meant. So I was like, man, that's actually a really that's actually a really well hidden one.
That's interesting you mention, though, like looking up a guide to affect the ending, like
Yeah.
at different points in the game, because I've struggled with Dishonored. I know Dishonored is much beloved, but that's a good example where you have to basically be playing for the ending from minute one if you want the good ending, right?
Yeah.
Which some people like and some people don't. To me, it's frustrating, right? Because I didn't even realize I'd basically destroyed my game by not doing all these incredibly complicated things to dishonor the bad guys rather than just killing them, right? Like usually a game doesn't set you on an ending path that into a game. So sometimes when people give you that heads up early on, hey, you can screw up your ending in this game 2 minutes in, or when Merve eventually, plays Final Fantasy, and I tell him to only feed the good fish to a certain person. Sometimes it is nice to have that heads up to use a walkthrough earlier than you normally would, and not just when you're stuck. But yeah, I don't know if that's good or not, but games that force you into an ending early on definitely are walkthrough games for me.
Or even games that would hide significant amounts of content from you if you uh, didn't consult a guide. Like my first time through a Persona game, which was Persona 4, I
Hmm.
used a like full game guide that I consulted every like the game is divided in-game days and there are 100 something of them. Um, every day in that game I used the guide just because I wanted to maximize my content and I wasn't really familiar with this kind of game, and that gave me the confidence to play Persona 5 without a guide, and I got,
Hmm.
not the optimal route. I didn't get to see all the content, but I did pretty well at seeing most of what I wanted to see. So it does it it is nice to have that heads up or to look it up when there is all that content that you could potentially miss.
Yeah, it's hard. You don't want to spoil them, obviously, but I do like when fans of a series will say, hey, you know, if you're worried about getting the good ending, this is what you got to do. Because I'm at that point where it's very rare for me to want to replay a game. Like right after I finish it, there's very few games where I'm like, yep, let's load that back up and get the good ending, right? I just go to YouTube and watch it, sure. But sometimes it's better to get that achievement if you know that, down the road, here's how you plan to do it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so that is one instance of when I use a guide. Um, Another time I use a guide is when, and it's not to say that I only use guides when I don't like a game, but I use a guide often when I don't feel like the game is respecting my time enough
Hmm.
for me to want to sit there and figure out what it wants me to do. So that was the case with Silt, which we were talking about earlier. There are definitely a few puzzles that weren't that hard that I could have probably figured out if I'd sat there for an hour wrestling with the game's controls. But at a certain
Right.
point, I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just looking at a guide so I can blast through this. Um, Turns out that wasn't enough because some of the puzzles, even when I knew the solution, took me like 40 tries. But sometimes using a guide kind of arises out of frustration,
Yeah.
more so than not being able to figure out how to proceed.
Hmm. And a lot of times in a game, you can just be like, "This section isn't for me," right? This
Yeah,
is a part that I don't enjoy, and I don't care if I have to look at, read every word out of this. I just want to get past this section and get back to the good stuff, right? Like, if that makes sense. Like sometimes there's a part of game you're just really vibing with. I was thinking about the weird game out of nowhere, but the Darksiders game, the original one, where like mostly it's this hacky and slashy type game in. And then there's this one area where it's just very, very, very platformy all of a sudden. And I was like, oh, I hate this stuff. I think it's like when you first get some type of transversal system, like I don't know what it was, but I remember just thinking, okay, I just want to get past this part. Just look at where to go and what box to hit and how to get past it so I can get back to hitting things with a giant sword. But I think that's another good time to use a guide when it's just like I'm enjoying this game generally, but I don't like this specific part. So it's
yeah,
not just I'm not enjoying this game.
yeah, absolutely. So when do you folks, like Wolf, Waffle, when do you folks consult guides? What makes you go and look one up?
I think my biggest guide moments are always when I've put a game down for a while and I'm picking it up again, and there's some kind of quest I'm on that I've completely forgotten, or there's some place that I'm supposed to go that I no longer have the mental map for. So I tend to use them a lot as like kind of a up to speed sort of thing. So I'll read through a little bit before wherever I'm picking up on, especially a long game, to just sort of get my head back into it and kind of start up again. Um, I don't find myself using them to solve puzzles as often.
Do you have to resist the urge to restart a game sometimes if you haven't played it for a while? Because that's
Yeah.
always like very powerful for me. If I'm like, oh, what was I doing? And it's just start over, just start over. And I have to, that's a good time to use a guide for sure, because the other answer is, okay, fine, let's just start it over.
Yeah, but
uh,
sometimes starting over can be like 20 hours of
mhm,
game gone, and that I don't necessarily want to redo those 20 hours just to get further
right.
along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
S- So it's nice to be able to just get up to speed and then kind of pick up where you left off. Wolfman, how about you?
It's I think maybe the best way I could explain like is just through the examples. If it's Dark Souls, figuring out which ending I might want and the thing I need to do to get there. Um, that also includes stuff like Mass Effect quests and whatever. Finding an object that like a collectible that otherwise I don't really want to bother looking for or grinding for. Um, and then and others might be some strategies for fighting some enemies. Um, just general stuff. So in the case of like Elden Ring or whatever, it was there. I don't feel bad about necessarily being okay. I'm more inclined to get this ending than this ending, so I'm going to work to get that one. Um, and if I want to also try a different area, but you need the magical hat of extra light in a dark room with no candles, then I can go look up where that hat is and get it.
So for you, it's for a kind of accomplishing specific feats within the game that
Yeah.
will push you to look something up. Yeah, I get a bit of that too sometimes when there's like a specific side quest or something like that that I don't really know how to go about doing, but I definitely want the reward at the end of that quest chain. Um, that's the kind of thing that'll push me to look up a guide to kind of figure
Yeah.
out what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I I don't. It's a spoiler thing too, but I'll definitely look at what my rewards are for certain quests. If I turn this in, what do I get from this guy versus what do I get from that guy, or what are the options, or if I don't keep the
Oh,
quest or reward type stuff.
oh, I'm actually thinking of doing that in Xenoblade. There's a quest where I can either with the Turkins, the Turkin
Mhm.
tribe. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So the
too many years
Turkins
of getting.
are, just to clarify, they're like, I guess, semi-sapient turkeys, I guess. Um,
Yeah, and there's a quest where there's like a really far out colony that's having a relationship with them, and it seems like I can either, and I'm not really sure, but I have two very dramatic endings that might include either trying to satiate their demands for tribute or possibly just going there and beating them up, and I'm not really sure. I don't want to be locked in.
One of the reasons I'm glad so many games have kind of gotten away from like the binary Paragon and Renegade systems is because of stuff like that, like choosing the wrong quest thing, locking you, down a quest path or something. So I feel like lately there's less of a need to look that up, but it does feel like a constraint in certain games where it's like, well, if you want the good ending, you have to do literally every good thing in the game, and here's a list of the right quest choices. So less and less of that, please.
it's always fun when you find out you did something really rare by accident. Like when you just by chance selected all the right options to get that kind of thing. Um, I can spoil Dragon Age Inquisition because it's an 8-year-old game now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so I found out after the fact that installing Leliana as a divine was actually really hard because
Hmm.
I did it just by chance selecting all the right dialogue options
Right.
to make it happen. And I had no idea I was doing that. And then I talked to people afterward. They're like, how the hell did you do that without looking it up? I was like,
Mhm.
I don't know. It just happened. Um,
We've talked about that before, where I've accidentally done things in games and my friends have been like, "How? That I don't believe you." And then you're like, "Yeah, look." And then that's always a cool thing to realize, exactly like what you're saying, that you've done something, that most people need a guide and you just did it by accident. I this is going to be something that many people aren't going to believe, but I figured out the miming the Knights of the Round thing in Final Fantasy. Merv has no idea what I'm talking about. I figured that kind of on my own. Like, and I was like, "Oh, this is broken. This is really broken." And I remember telling my friend about it. He's like, "Yeah, everybody knows that." I'm like, I felt like way less special, but I legitimately found it on my own. And when I was a kid, I was like, "Yeah, I mimed this thing, and then I used this ability, and everybody just sat there and we kept casting it over and over and over again." And he's like, "Yeah, everybody knows that." I felt so dumb, but it's like at the time it felt cool. But yeah, sometimes it backfires on you.
yeah, the way I see it, if you discovered it all by your lonesome, it's as good as if you were the first person to discover it,
Right.
although you don't get the credit for it.
Yeah, you just don't get to name it, right?
Yeah, it's not
Not
like
the
the
Kappa
Kappa
method.
finding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So I did want to ask, like, I know guides and walkthroughs have kind of changed over the years. Um,
Yeah.
what kind of medium do you typically use? Do you prefer to look up text walkthroughs where they still
Ooh,
exist? Do you prefer YouTube tutorials? Does it depend on what you're
I
looking up?
I hate YouTube tutorials
yeah,
entirely.
same.
I'm
Same.
a reader, like skipping ahead on your phone to the right place just to try to copy an input or whatever is exhausting and just feels completely unhelpful.
So many times I just need one sentence of information, and I just don't need to watch a 5-minute YouTube intro and then a sponsor, and then you know what I mean, just to get to the part of the meat that I need.
Yeah.
I always look for text guides first. I still use GameFAQs even. I mean, just because I would rather prefer to see it in that format, because I know it's kind of indexed and searchable and stuff like that. But if I have to do a YouTube, I will. But oh, it's just the worst sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
I love looking up something and finding a video for it and seeing it's like 32 seconds. I'm like, oh, thank you. But I hate this is probably a me thing, but when you're looking up something very specific on a YouTube, like where do I go to do this thing? And they just like they don't show you the map, they don't show you like the mini map. They're just there at the quest giver or whatever, right? And you're like, you're giving me half the information. Now I've got to go look at another guide to find out where this guy is, for example. It's just so weird that there's so many people out there who are making guides who don't get the basics of doing a guide. It's so refreshing when you like go to someone's channel and they're like, here's how do you go to this quest. And they start out in the menu, then they bring up the big map, let that sit on the screen for a second or two, bring it down to the mini map, and then they show you exactly like how to get to the guide. They're not just automatically at the thing that you're looking up.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
absolutely. Um, one of the other things that's a little bit frustrating to me about YouTube is while I'm not opposed to YouTube in principle, the big problem I have with it is that you can't control F a YouTube video. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I'm looking for specific information and I
Right.
just
Yeah.
want to look up that one specific thing. And like sometimes it's going to be buried in someone's 20-minute walkthrough video. And like you, I'm always super happy when there's a specific video for the exact thing I want to do. And it's a brief video that I can just watch because otherwise it's a huge pain scrubbing through a video looking for the exact moment that tells you how to do the thing you're trying to do.
Huh,
Yeah,
yeah.
especially if there's a potential for like spoilers for something
Yeah.
further on if you
Right.
go too far.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
absolutely will avoid a video that's too long for something that I'm looking for.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
those heroes in the comments who are like, the thing you're looking for is at, like 34:22 or something in a Let's Play. It's like, oh, thank you. I can not have to jump around this whole video.
Yeah. It's not as though videos are completely immune from the spoiler thing too, because
Mhm.
you definitely have like any game with a true ending that's big enough to get an article and a publication for the true ending. Half the time, the picture will be from the true ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even text as a medium, yeah, you're absolutely right, is not immune. Um, but I also find it's gotten really difficult in this day and age, especially when you're searching for guides online, to avoid spoilers. Because sometimes when you're Googling search results or you're looking up something on YouTube, some of the first results will be spoiler content.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so you just kind of have to look in the right places.
Oh
Otherwise,
no.
yeah, you're getting info you don't want to get yet.
Yeah, okay. I need to quit. I need to help this quest for my townmate Oliver. Oh, okay. I guess you're now going to fight him as a boss in chapter 3. Oh, I guess you're actually. Oh, wait, no, you're going to fight him as a boss, and then 2 chapters later, he's going to be in your party. Oh, he's also going to get killed right near the end, and then
Yeah,
he'll be
you're
in the
not.
true ending.
Yeah, you're not at the part where he's been possessed by the devil and killed your family. Oh, wait till you get to that part. It's gonna be so good. You're like, oh, why? Yeah, I've noticed that particularly JRPG guides tend to give you too much background and too much foreshadowing sometimes than what you really need. I think it's just part of the nature of like when people are explaining some of the stuff, like why they're doing it rather than what to do. And that's something when I always try to like read for context clues. Is this person telling me what to do or why they did it? There's kind of two different answers there if you're really looking at it, you know?
Yeah, and I prefer the dry what. Like
Hmm.
just tell me how to get over the obstacle I'm facing right now. If
Right,
I want a general guide, like a build guide, then I'll go look that up, right? But
right.
if it's just some obstacle that I'm trying to get over, I don't need the whole meta, you know what I mean? I don't
Hmm.
need the character builds. I don't need you telling me what items I should have in my inventory at this point. Just tell me how to do the thing that I'm currently trying to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Yeah, and like on that note, like on the note of searching for help with a game, obviously there are guides published online or in videos, but do you sometimes find yourself like asking for specific help? Like do you go on a forum ever and ask, or
No,
do you brave the Steam community
no.
forums?
I will ask the avocado during a games thread, or I will ask a friend during a live show in person, like directly. I'm not going to go into a Discord.
Subreddits are very if they're
Very
so
hit or miss, right?
micro communities. Yeah, like some will be like amazingly helpful and some will be like, yeah, we get this question 20 times a week. Go look it up on Google. You're like, geez, man. And so yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a good answer, but I find like that like I said, I still use GameFAQs. Subreddits are very hit and miss. I'll sometimes use those, but if I'm really just kind of looking for maybe a little contextual stuff about something I'm trying to figure out, um, usually what I do, and I think a lot of people just ask on the avocado. It's just
Yeah.
usually people are very good about like, hey, this is what you're asking, this is the answer to it, and I'm not going to give you any more. If you want me to give you some more, I will, but good luck. That's one of the ways I think our community is really good for the gaming in particular. We're very good about being, recognizing like this isn't the answer the person may want, but that's what they're asking, so that's what they're going to get. And if they want more information, they can ask more, but I'm not gonna offer more without them prompting it. I think that's a very cool thing that we all kind of tend to do there.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, spoiler tags are a godsend
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
then you can
Yes.
kind of like put this in, you can kind of put in gradations of disclosure. Like, here's the basic fundamentals of what you need to know. If you don't mind being spoiled a bit, here's a bit more information, and I'm not going to tell you anything more because it would be a huge spoiler. I find
Right.
that's really useful.
hmm and like I was mentioning earlier, it's also a very good place for people to say, look, if you really want to do this thing, because I'm reading your comments and seeing what you want to do, I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't do X, Y, or Z 15 minutes into the game, you're not going to get the desired outcome. So I'm just going to give you the heads up. I know it feels like a spoiler now, but you know, I, it's better than letting somebody waste a whole bunch of time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
I find the avocado best for things like tone or like content that I'm potentially not
Ooh,
wanting to
yeah.
see.
yeah.
I had watched somebody starting to play Cooking Companions, which is kind of it's a horror game in sort of a storybook style, but I wasn't familiar with what exact sort of horror game it was, and watching somebody play it for a while, it actually was something that I was not at all comfortable with, and but I felt like maybe I had hit the point where the thing that was bothering me was at its worst. So I was able to go and ask, like, hey, am I still going to have a hard time with this game if I continue to watch somebody play it? Is this theme going to continue to reoccur, or have I already gotten to the worst part of it? That way, asking for very pointed, very specific spoilers, especially things that I definitely wouldn't want to talk about on Reddit, or
Yeah.
that like a walkthrough video would just show me, and not give me that kind of nuance.
Yeah, I was playing. Oh, I wish I could remember the game now. The Sweeney Todd game a couple weeks ago. I was talking about it, but that was a good example because a lot of people were when I was recommending. I said it's a very specific type of game that if you're not into it, and it's got very dark, very 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 graphic, depictions of violence and stuff like that. So if you're not into it, you're not going to like it. But otherwise, if this is something that you can handle, yeah, it's a really, really, really fun game. I wish I remember the name of that game. It was like a 2-hour game too, but
We'll put it in the link dump once
yeah,
you
I'll
remember.
remember it.
Um, yeah, I found it also really helpful both for
Ravenous
giving info.
Devils.
Sorry?
Sorry, Ravenous Devils.
Ah, okay. We'll put that in. Um, I found it very helpful, yeah, along those lines, both giving information and receiving information about how ideas and themes are handled in a game. Like, not so one thing a lot of people were asking me last year when I was playing through Tales of Arise was how it handled its subject matter, because it deals with some pretty heavy stuff. And what I was able to tell them was that it was kind of like the reason it stumbled wasn't because it necessarily like did anything offensive, but because it was
Mhm.
trying to combine um, an anti-oppression workshop with a graduate seminar on um, like history of conflict, and those things don't work together very well. Um, which is like it's a very specific kind of mishandling, but then that allowed people to figure out, okay, is this going to like sit well with me or not? Um, and being able to give out that information, I think, gave people the tools to figure out whether they want to embark on that game or not. Um, By the way, overall pretty mediocre game. There are other JRPGs that are better use of your time, but not terrible. Um, so yeah, definitely tone and how subject matter is handled is a really great part of a really important part of being able to discuss games online. And being online has made figuring out that stuff a lot easier. But on the flip side of that, there's still guides that are available for purchase that are published in like book format.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone out and purchased one of those, like a Prima or Brady
In,
strategy guide?
in like recently?
Uh,
No.
at any
The
point in your life, I guess.
Oh yeah,
But
okay. Because when I was a teenager, because I was born in '91, so I think I was kind of hit like the exact right age for buying a Prima guide when you're like right as a preteen and then very early in your teens. Which kind of is perfect because that was right before the big crash where they just completely went down.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I was kind of that prime age too, because I'm like a year older than you. And but like there were I didn't play that many video games as a teen, so I was never kind of in that sweet spot to want to purchase a guide. And by the time I got back into video games as an adult, that whole thing had passed me by. So like in the one window, my teens, when I wasn't really playing games, that would have been my optimal window to go buy guides. And I kind of missed my window on that. And I kind of feel like I missed out on a part of gaming history in a way because
um, yeah, yes and no. I mean, one of the weird things about guides is like at some points they almost became more collectibles than actual useful guides, if that makes sense, because they couldn't keep up with the actual game that was released versus
Certainly
the
not updates.
right,
yeah,
right. So the actual version that they got to play 6 months before the game came out is not exactly relevant to the game you're sitting there playing at points. Like I think maybe the last one I bought was maybe The Witcher 3 or Dragon Age, but because I like to have the maps just there in front of me and stuff like that, rather than a second monitor. I prefer to have a movie on my second monitor, and rather than like having to constantly alt tab and look at stuff, I was like, oh, I'll get the guides on these. But even those gigantic, huge games, don't get me wrong, but they're just not accurate after a certain point, right? So I'm looking up this map. I'm like, this guy's not here. This thing's not here. This is not how I make this thing. So it starts to frustrate you even more than having, the actual just having the the a YouTube up or something on the other monitor to help you out. But
Uh,
there was kind of a nice window where games were coming out, they weren't getting a ton of patches, they weren't getting those day one patches, and you could basically start to finish with a guide. But it was a very thin window of like probably like Halo 1-ish era,
Late
until
'90s to
like mid
early,
aughts.
like yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Like once, like yeah, like maybe 2008 was the I'll just put randomly as a cutoff point.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
we can blame it
like
on the
that's
financial crash. It's cool.
yeah, so you had about you had about a 5-year window. One of the funny things, I worked at a bookstore during that time, and game guides were like basically if they didn't sell in the first week, they're just like throwing them away, like literally just dumping because no one's coming to buy them after a certain point, right? So, I
Uh,
mean, you could get game guides for next to nothing. Um,
the um the one thing is though that like I actually have a very strong fondness for that kind of guide. It's not really tenable anymore. Obviously, not when the vast majority of games we're purchasing are games that have either the intention or the need to update themselves in some form. But like, there was I think a nice physicality to like actually having a book instead of just another screen. Um,
mm,
the for I had a weird like I guess you could call it like jump gap in when I was playing. Had an N64 when I was about like 9 or so, and then the GameCube came out and I was excited but ultimately declined to play it because even as like a weird young preteen, I was very very invested in backwards compatibility on a philosophical level. It was just like, why buy a new console when they're not going to bother supporting the old console?
Mhm.
So, but I still kind of wanted to play those GameCube games until 2005 when I went searching for a sequel to Banjo-Kazooie that turned out to actually not exist, and then ended up buying a GameCube for Paper Mario 2. But for a long time, I was kind of only looking out from the side. I wasn't really super online then. But I did have this one thing, a 4-in-1 GameCube guide. I'm going to actually link to it right now in the chat. See, when this is this one thing. It was a guide for Super Smash Bros. Melee, Pikmin 1, Luigi's Mansion, and Wave Race Blue Storm. The latter of which I didn't care about, so I didn't end up reading that part. But everything else, it was like magic. I mean, this was a thin guide. Like, this was not a genuinely, like, thick tome that was giving you a bunch of stuff. It was very cut and dry, but it was still very exciting to see these very disparate games. And for a long time, they kind of did seem like the future.
I think it's interesting in a way that they'd publish this kind of thing, because it's almost like it's encouraging you to buy the other games. Like, say you buy Pikmin and Luigi's Mansion, and now you have guides for these other two games. You're like, well, I guess I might as well get the new Wave Race. So I guess it's a pretty clever marketing ploy.
That, or they just were like, okay, no one's actually going to buy a guide for Wave Race.
But someone wrote it, so we're putting it out there.
Go faster.
Yeah. Push harder on the stick, you idiot.
But look, there's like a demon riding a jet thing. Why didn't I think that was cool? I was younger.
Wave Race is a thing that I've never played more than like 10 minutes of Wave Race, but it's a thing that I kind of just, for some weird reason, want to be popular. Like, I want Wave Race to be the biggest damn thing in the world, and I have no idea why.
You're like one of those F-Zero people.
I am. I've never played an F-Zero game, but I want Nintendo to make a new F-Zero. I have no idea why. I've invested in this for absolutely no reason. It's great.
That it's out there in the wild.
Yeah, I just want the F-Zero people to be happy, okay?
Yeah.
I want them to have good things.
Let's just say that's me with the Sonic people. I'm a well-wisher, and that I don't specifically wish them any harm.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sonic guys. Get you another Sonic game.
You're far more generous than me in that regard.
Look,
you probably deserve it. I don't know you.
Look, Sonic Frontiers will exist.
Oh yeah, that's coming out. Wait, is that coming out this year? Was it delayed?
Real soon.
It's like in a month or 2 months or something.
Oh god, this is gonna be. Oh no, we're gonna have to do Project Soundwatch 2022, and it's gonna be so bad.
I know.
I just wanted to also mention that like a lot of these were just generic like guides from Prima, and I think the work that went into them is still work. It's still respectable. People did. I think there was like a lot of genuine efforts to like make a lot of this material clear and understandable. But then there would sometimes you'd get like really unauthorized guides.
Yeah.
Which I had a one for Banjo-Kazooie. I'll link to that in the show notes later, and then one for Pokemon Gold and Silver. And I really like the latter because of the fact that it went in like the author would take time out making diatribes about like why it didn't make sense to have a Pokemon that was part grass and part flying, or part ground and part flying. It's like they're running out with ideas.
The good news is those still exist, like the unauthorized guides. I don't know if like there's less authorized guides. It's just harder to license and work with the devs and stuff. But like, I think about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, I bought my son an unauthorized guide to Fortnite, and like I was like, look, you're gonna know everything in here, and it's basically got it as a joke gift, and I was like, this is gonna be the funniest thing you've ever read. So I sat down. He's like, none of this is real. I'm like, yeah, this is what we used to have when I was a kid, the unauthorized guides, and like it was like you were reading some secret tome, and then it's just like, no, they just tell you the stuff like you would know 15 minutes into the game and sold it to our parents.
By the way, if I remember correctly, the Banjo-Kazooie Totally Unauthorized Strategy Guide does not actually give you advice on how to beat the final boss.
It was too hard for the person writing it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, to be fair,
well, you got here. Good luck.
I mean, to be fair, I have beaten Banjo-Kazooie, and that is completely valid. Like, that's an obnoxious as hell final boss.
Yeah, there's so much because I mean, like one, like when you're talking about like I got him the Fortnite guide, and it's like if you're in a fight, you should build. Like that's literally the kind of advice they're giving you. It's like, what do I do with it? And there's like a section about like best dance moves to taunt your opponents. It's just like as he was reading, I just like hear him groan or like look at me like, Dad, this is stupid. I'm like, yeah, I know. Keep reading.
Best ways to troll, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like these outfits make you look cool, and he's like, it's like listing stuff that hasn't been in the game for like 3 years.
It's like trying to give the kids fashion tips.
I'm gonna have to get a picture of this because it's like it's also got like a like there's like a section at the end, and it's got like Fortnite definitions, and it's like it's not even it's like 10-year-old like oh check out your moves, and then like it'll like have like a definition for moves like in parentheses like these include dances, emotes, and sprays.
Yeah. Oh, on the opposite end though, is the very notorious Nintendo guide to Earthbound.
So
No.
I don't know about this, so tell me about it.
Okay, so basically, like when Nintendo was coming out with Mother 2 / what we call Earthbound, they were a little bit. Nintendo of America was a little bit worried. That just the link is literally to that actual PDF that Nintendo has officially made available for free download. Like, so that's why it just comes off as a weird link. But sorry about that.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, the which you should all read, as they are exciting and full of fun details and mysterious asides.
And corrections, because occasionally I accidentally lie.
Yeah. So basically, Nintendo
they just
was
re-released this, right? Like months ago, right?
Yeah, Earthbound. Yeah.
Yeah.
I replayed it. Still good.
Oh no, I mean the guide. Nintendo actually re-released this guide.
Yes. Yeah. That's why the link is to. Yeah. This is literally something they re-released just now.
Yeah.
Or not just now, but.
A little while back.
I guess the actual date will have to also be a correction for the show notes.
That's okay. So what's special about this?
Basically, like, for whatever reason, probably the fact that the game looked good but wasn't like a boundary pusher for graphics, and the fact that it's really weird and extremely confusing at many times and kind of inscrutable in a lot of ways. Your main character can become homesick. You need an item that exists to erase giant fake pencils. One of your main characters has a move that is completely useless and is the only thing that can beat the final boss. Because for that reason, they made a strategy guide for Earthbound, and it wasn't just like a strategy guide. They actually structured it like a travel guide. Like each page or 2 pages was a different kind, was like advertising the local shops and the climate of each new town you were going to visit on your weird stop to defeat the ultimate cosmic destroyer.
This was golden back in the day. Opening a game and seeing stuff like this was just
It was it's very cool, and the guide is still helpful, but it's also just incredibly charming, and it maybe that was why the game flopped in America, because Nintendo sold the game with the guide. And a combination of that, the very bad marketing campaign where a bad guy who looks like a pile of vomit says this game stinks, and the fact that because they sold the cartridge with the guide, they had to actually put them. They wouldn't fit in the regular video game store shelves, so no one actually bought it.
Yeah, they probably had to put it like with the books or something, and like in a lot of places, that's because you can't lock up a book usually.
For a game.
Yeah,
for sure. I'm looking at this guide right now, and like every section of this travel guide has like the list of enemies you can meet there. And in the Peaceful Rest Valley and Happy Village, There's a rambling evil mushroom, a new age retro hippie, an annoying old party man, and a spinning robo. I love that it just has like the list of enemies you're gonna meet, and I knew that Earthbound was wacky, but I was not expecting that. It also has not only the enemies but the price list for the stores in each area, with like
Yeah.
little ad inserts for each of them. So there's one that says it's going to charge you $12 for fresh eggs, which sounds like a lot, even in this era of inflation. So I don't know.
It's it you know even like it's not exactly what we're talking about with strategy guides, but even the instruction manuals for games used to be so well done, and it would just be like
Yeah.
almost reading like a graphic novels sometimes worth of content about this is what this game's story is about, this is who your hero is, this is the game world. It was like I can remember just sitting like getting a new game and just reading the instruction manual on the way home as my parents drove me home, and I'm just like I'm so ready to play this game. And of course it ends up being like Captain Skyhawk, and it's not not anything. The year is 2034 and evil force, and then you actually play the game. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. But it was just such a cool way to get invested in the game before you even actually turning it on. Not
Yeah.
exactly a guide, but yeah, I love that stuff.
There's a part of me that kind of wonders if like classic Rareware like was way more interested in making the guides than the actual game at times. Like, yeah.
And even old Blizzard games, like if you played like Warcraft, like Orcs and Humans and stuff, it was like you would open that and it was just thousands of years ago. It was like, just lore and just dripping with like art drawings and like real like I don't know, not like Frazetta, but like that old style of drawing where it's just aligned pencils and there's just a troll with all kinds of layers of junk on them. It's like, yeah, maybe these guys just want to make a book and not really a game, but then you play the game and it's not exactly living up to the instruction manual.
Um, I know
Yeah, that
I've
was
meant.
always a disappointment. There were some really amazing. I think I had one for like Legend of Zelda. Probably would have been Ocarina of Time, and the game that's in that book and the game that I played are two very different things. Both
Yeah.
of them were very interesting, but they didn't really intersect the way they should have.
It was always difficult because they want to tell you the story and get you like into the world and into the game and stuff, but they've also got to answer like very basic stuff like what does the A button do. But um a lot of times, especially those early Nintendo games, you could tell they really loved their games. And that's what they were there to tell you. But the games themselves were okay. Yeah, we're still playing a Zelda game, but those were gorgeous manuals too back in the day. The Nintendo 64 era was really, really cool for good manuals.
I know I've
Yeah.
mentioned this on the podcast before, but one of the games I had growing up was the special edition of SimCity 2000, and it actually came with not just a manual, but also a companion. It did. The manual came with a special section that was
Mhm.
just a collection of essays and artwork about urbanism and cities, which is such an interesting but an appropriate thing to include with that kind of game. And I didn't appreciate it because, I was 10 years old at the time, so I didn't understand anything about urban planning. But I think my parents threw it out. I wish I still had it because I think I would have found it fascinating as an adult.
you know, that might have been a Sid Meier. He was doing some of those early Sims, right? Sim games. Wasn't that
Will
him?
Wright is the
Will Wright, yeah.
guy you're thinking
Yeah,
of.
I know. Well, Sid Meier definitely was into that too. I remember buying the original Pirates with an exclamation point game, and
Yeah.
there was kind of the same thing in one of those instruction manuals. This would have been on PC, but it was like the golden age of piracy. It's just like telling you like all this stuff about this was when pirates were doing this stuff, and just kind of an interesting like a little bit more than just the actual how to play the game. So I always thought that was kind of an interesting way to like, yeah, this is based on real world stuff.
Yeah, I love that little bit of flavor that you used to get from manuals and um, companion materials. And I like in some ways I lament its loss, but I also understand that that sort of stuff is better integrated in the games themselves
Hmm.
now. Um, so it's not like we've lost everything. But I do like that tactile feel of holding something in my hand and it informing me about the game in front of me. So one last thing that I did want to talk about, and it's something that Waff brought up when they suggested this topic, was where do you personally draw the line between getting help from a guide or getting some kind of help and cheating?
Oh, I'm a big
I know
cheater.
Kappa has thoughts
I'm
on,
a
on
big
cheating.
I
Um,
got no lines.
yeah.
This is the Wild West. Just
So I'm just
like
going to give my thoughts here and then I'll throw it open to you folks. Um, I don't think it's cheating to look up any info online. You want to go look something up, go look something up. I will say it is quote unquote cheating if you use Game Shark or a cheat engine. Uh,
I mean,
it
that's
to
literally cheating.
Yeah, it's literally cheating. But I also, if it's a single player game, I don't think there's any moral dimension to that. Like
Yeah.
the game's in front of you, you own it. Do what you like with it. You want to cheat? Go ahead, have fun. Um, Again, this only applies to single player games for obvious
Yeah.
reasons, but like,
Yeah,
yeah,
not
Also,
relationships. Yeah.
yeah,
also does not apply to any theoretical speed runs done by a video game that may have
Oh,
happened this year.
yeah.
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 So don't submit your pre-recorded cheat runs and accompany them with a really bizarre monologue, and then get yourself essentially kicked out of the speedrunning community. Don't do that. um,
Not recommended.
yeah, but other than that, cheat away.
Yeah, I think for me, I've got lots of different little personal rules for, what I'll do and things like that. But one thing I always notice is like, let's say I'm replaying, like right now I'm replaying Mass Effect Legendary Edition, right? And I could look up a guide, but I know that game pretty much like the back of my hand. But rather than do all those little weird quests and do all these things so I can have credits and Omnigel and all that stuff, I just go right into the save editor, give myself the credits and the Omnigel, and it's just then I can just go about playing the game for the story like I want to, right? So I sometimes use cheats in place of walkthroughs or things I already know how to do because I don't want to bother with it, right? Um, it's hard though. It's hard to describe exactly where that line is for me, but I don't need a guide to get through Mass Effect, but I don't also want to do all the stuff that a guide would tell me to do anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's useful for stuff that you kind of know how to do, but then exactly remembering how to do it would be a big waste of time. So might as well just automate that almost.
Yeah, yeah. And it's especially when you're dealing with a game where you are like I'm loving that games right now have added the story difficulty or whatever you want to call it. Like the hey,
Yeah.
I'm here to basically push a button occasionally and watch a moving movie or something like that. But I like that option in a lot of games. But when you go back and replay games a lot, you start to notice like how many things get in the way of you enjoying the plot that you're kind of there for. Replaying it for me is almost always I want to relive these moments. I don't want to go farm 100 or go scan 20 keepers in the Citadel or whatever. But that's the stuff you've got to do. So you've got the game economy later on to do the cooler things. So I just skip that whole system sometimes.
Yeah, just set that quest flag to done, get the
Yep.
rewards, and then
Yeah, I'm done it. Yep.
get on your
Yep.
merry way. Um, so I've used Cheat Engine twice in my life. One, I'm just gonna say it, and I know some people are gonna be really mad when I say this. I used Cheat Engine to get through Sekiro
Yeah. I
because
remember that being a struggle for you, honestly.
I got to a boss that I thought I'd beaten, and then it had a secret third phase that killed me in two shots. And at that moment, I realized the game was just wasting my time. So I effectively cheated myself in easy mode by manipulating damage and health values. Um, that made the game way more fun, by the way. So uh, that's one thing in favor of there being an actual easy mode in Sekiro. It's still not properly balanced, and actually one of the problems with Sekiro is that fighting the regular enemies is way too easy, and fighting the bosses is way. Sorry, Kappa just shared in the chat the copy pasta.
That was a Sekiro copy.
Yeah, that was
pasta,
the
dude.
Sekiro copy pasta.
I I mean, again, as a person who has played a lot of FromSoft but can't parry to save his life, and by extension can't really play Sekiro, it seemed as though like that's the whole thing, right? Like that it was just so much of the challenge in that game is just for just mastering really specific boss fights, and everything else kind of isn't really important.
Yeah, I feel like it just didn't distribute the difficulty correctly. So I more or less cruise through the non-boss bits, and then I get to a boss, and it would be a 10-hour brick wall. And that's when I realized I didn't want to spend 10 hours essentially doing violin practice, and I might as well just pick up my violin again and play that. So that's when I realized I was just gonna cheat my way through.
I uh, uh, if I hope this hasn't dissuaded you from necessarily playing some of the other, perhaps actually more balanced games in their oeuvre.
I gotta be honest, it kind of has, not because I'm not curious, but because I have limited time on this earth and there are so many other games I want to play. And
Yeah,
that's not like, that's no disrespect to their craft. I'm sure I'd probably get something out of Elden Ring. It's just there's so many other games this year, and I know I'm gonna sink like 100 hours into Xenoblade this year, so
yeah.
I just unfortunately don't have the time at the moment. The other game that I used Cheat Engine for uh, was the game I played this year, and I like actually specifically I hadn't had Cheat Engine installed on this machine yet, so I actually went and specifically installed it, and that was The Good Life. Uh,
Mm.
so foreshadowing, it pays
Yeah.
off eventually
Yeah,
in
we
this
talked about
podcast.
callback.
This podcast is a plot and everything. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. um, so the reason I used it for The Good Life is because uh, this is supposed to be a life sim RPG, I guess. And that means it comes with survival mechanics. You have to monitor your hunger and your thirst and your sanity and your health. And you keep getting sick and having to go to the doctor. And this is all extraordinarily tedious. And I didn't want to bother with it anymore. So I just cheated myself like zero damage, zero hunger, zero thirst,
It's
zero insanity, and just went through the plot, which was still terrible, by the way. Like, this game is completely awful,
it's
but
very surprising though that
yeah.
for this kind of comfy style game, that wasn't just a straight up mode. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't know, like that. This is exactly the type of game I think should have that story mode where all that stuff is defaulted off, right?
Yeah, it should. It wouldn't be a good game, but at least it wouldn't be. It would, instead of being one of the worst games ever made, it would just be one of the worst games that I've personally played. Um, But like, yeah, it didn't need all those mechanics. They didn't add anything to the game. And aside from a couple of combat encounters, taking all those mechanics out didn't take anything away from the game. In fact, it just enhanced the game in every way. So I think it sometimes, like when I use Cheat Engine, it's like, if I'm being frank, to correct a deficiency or a mistake in the game design.
Oh yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you. I look at it a lot of times the same way. I remember one of the big things that I would do in Cheat Engine, and like some of the Total War games, is you would have these weird battles where like your army would be wiped out at the end of them, and the AI would attack you with the same army, but all their stuff was right back at it, and the AI was cheating. It was there was no like if, ands, or buts, right? So yeah, I think we can even things up a little. Right? But yeah, I agree. Whenever I feel like this is me evening it up or me making the system right, do it. It's a game. You're supposed to have fun with it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I've only used it in games I didn't like, but it made them bearable. It made me push through them. Um, I will say Sekiro I prefer considerably to The Good Life. I think there's a lot of good in Sekiro. There's just some bad elements that kind of drag the whole game down. Uh, but yeah, it was for correcting stuff that I didn't like about the game. And yeah, it's cheating. It totally is cheating. If I earned a quote unquote hollow victory where I learned nothing and sacrificed nothing, I forget the entire copy pasta. Um,
It's sad that you don't know the difference.
oh, I know the difference, and I am proud of it. I proudly cheated my ass through that game.
Part of it is it sounds bad to say you get older. You really do, and you got so many demands for your time. It used to be when I was 22, if someone was like, "Oh, this RPG is like 150 hours," I'm like, "Oh my god, I can't wait! I'm gonna lose myself in this game. It's gonna take over my life for the next 2-3 weeks. I'm gonna love it so much." And I was like, "Oh my god, I don't have time for that shit. I just don't like." I don't have I don't know. I just don't have that type of want to put into most games. There's some games, obviously, I
yeah,
play Destiny the shit out of it, but that's more like something I can play 2 or 3 hours a day. But I don't have that type of time to just invest in a 120-hour RPG that I like you said earlier. If it's doesn't respect my time and it makes me do a bunch of fetch bullshit and collect 5 million little bugs, that are 2 pixels big. No, I'm good. I don't need to do it.
yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of pull back the curtain a bit, one of the things we were talking about before we actually started recording was that like we were slammed at work.
Yeah,
And like
yeah,
I mentioned
all of us.
specifically, like all of us were mentioning about how we were slammed at work or had a lot going on in our lives at the moment. And like I actually fully intended, because I had some days that were supposed to be relatively free this week, I fully intended to spend like 20 hours playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And then real life intruded. I got slammed with a new request at work, and it ended up taking out so much of my time, and I'm working late these days, and I'm watching that time to play the game slip away. And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a game that I'm currently loving, so I'm going to kind of play through it as intended. But if I were playing through an RPG, say on my PC where I actually can use Cheat Engine, and I wasn't fully enjoying it, yeah, this would be a day where I pull out the Cheat Engine and start filling with the values and tables. Um, because like I have real life adult responsibilities sometimes that make me like I still enjoy the medium. I still love playing video games, but I have other things to do. I have like chores to do, dishes to wash, clothes to fold, like and a job that I'm actually paid to do. So yeah, you're absolutely right. As you grow up, sometimes you just don't have the patience or don't have the time for this stuff.
I guess
I
I'll.
actually think there are occasions when a guide can be cheating though, and that was part of the reason that I brought this up in general as a topic. I've been playing off and on some Baba Is You.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
I love that
I
game.
Game
adore
of the millennium.
puzzles. I adore puzzle games, and this one has just absolutely bent my brain so bad that I did finally hit a point where I had to look up an answer, and it was cheating. It was straight up cheating. There, I don't think there's any way around it because it wasn't giving me a hint. It wasn't telling me where to find a traitor. It was showing me how to complete the puzzle.
Yeah.
And to be fair, if I hadn't watched that, I would never ever have figured it out. It was using a mechanic in the game that I hadn't really understood fully, in a way that I didn't understand it was used in, and I genuinely never would have gotten there myself. I would have just been stuck there forever. But the horrible part is I don't think I've gone back since then. I feel like I tainted the game for myself. Once I broke that seal and started actually using a guide to show me how to complete a puzzle, it was like, well, why am I still trying then? Why am I not just watching somebody else play it? If I'm that uninterested in spending hours of my life banging my head against it, why am I still here? So I kind of ruined it for myself in a weird way, without cheating in the more traditional, I actually went in and changed the code sense.
I totally get what you mean because I actually did also reach that point with Baba Is You. Um, Not like there are like two endings to Baba Is You. There's like the first one where you roll credits and then you can go and play more of the game if you solve the last puzzle in an alternate way. Sorry, we just spoiled a little bit of Baba Is You, but
Oh
it's
no.
not that much. Anyway, so I made it up until like the first roll of the credits without consulting a guide, but then I wanted to play more of it, right? Because I was really loving this, and I got to one puzzle where I was like, I don't know how to do this, and I don't think I'll ever figure this out myself. And yeah, it did feel a little bit like I was giving up. Like I was going there into a guide and like kind of taking the joy of discovery out of it. But the way I rationalized it to myself was, okay, once I look this up, I'll get to another puzzle and I'll unlock some other puzzles that I can then kind of go back to doing the old way, not quote unquote cheating. Um, so I think that kind of got me over that hurdle. Was
Well, let
just
me ask you this, because go ahead.
Um, for this is something that I did in Return of the Obra Dinn. It's a great game. The puzzles are brilliant. I could not figure out many of them, but what I always tried to do to because I kind of felt like that, I wanted to at least give myself the idea of like how as I did try to like actively go in and work it out even while I knew the solution, just to like so I could be like, okay, this is how this person died, and this is what I could have seen. It was, I think, a way for me to avoid feeling the way Waffle felt.
I don't
Um,
play many puzzle games because I'm a dummy, but um,
th-
let me ask this. So, is there a part with some of those puzzle games where you feel like this isn't cheating because it's a failure of game design because they didn't teach me how to do this?
yes and no. It can be because the game is it can be because the game has bad mechanics. It is because the game has badly explained stuff. It could also be because the game is just doing a puzzle that's at an absurdly high level, and sometimes that's not fair, and sometimes that is fair. Like, I
yeah,
think that Obra Dinn or probably Baba Is You are games that were designed and were very open that they were gonna be hard,
Mhm.
and uh,
yeah. I will mention about Baba Is You. Someone online, I'll see if I can dig it up for the link dump, published a quote unquote spoiler-free walkthrough of Baba Is You, where it's just hints for every puzzle, and um, hints that'll kind of almost certainly guide
That's
you
interesting.
towards the correct answer, but they wanted to preserve that feeling of you not like having cheated yourself through the game. So like it's all hint based, which I
So,
thought was a really neat idea.
I think
Um,
that's very cool.
It is.
and sorry, Wolfman, on the subject of like puzzles, like that you feel uh don't uh don't really fit with the game, and you kind of use a walkthrough for that. The the good example I have for that one is minor spoilers for Broken Age, the snake puzzle. Those of you who play Broken Age will know exactly what I'm talking about. No other puzzle in the game involves timing really to the same degree. And there's one particular puzzle where you have to wait for something to happen, and no other puzzle works like that. And I never, like, because no other puzzle in the game worked like that, there was no way that I ever would have thought to wait for something to happen. And so that's you're exactly right, Wolfman. Puzzles that kind of operate outside the rules that the game kind of implicitly imparts to you, those I think are really good use cases for looking up a guide and quote unquote cheating yourself the solution.
Having said that, thanks. But I actually do want to make like maybe a counterpoint to what you and Kappa were saying though earlier, because
Uh,
like I'm not someone who uses. I don't play on PC basically ever. I haven't played a PC game since I don't know, maybe Pony Island. Uh, like
yeah,
I mostly have historically always played on Nintendo systems and consoles in general. So mod support is never going to be like a thing for me.
unless you pay Bethesda.
yeah, yeah.
Which Yeah, I have not since Prey.
Great game.
Yeah,
But yeah, sorry, you're saying something.
but basically, like, so to a certain extent, I don't really have the option to actually add cheat codes or use actual modifications. It really is, I have to take the game at its own word. Um, and for the most part, I don't really ever feel like I, I I rarely feel like I've ever had my time wasted in a game, even when I play bad games, or at least, I mean, I write a lot about the bad games I play, so
Yeah.
at least that. Um, it was honestly the very first. Actually, it was only this year that I actually felt something like this when I got the DLC for Kingdom Hearts 3. Um, which is mostly just a selection of the same boss fights you fought in the end of the last game, but harder, and then obscenely harder to the point where you basically have to be at the highest level of play to even begin fighting them.
Yeah,
And
and that does strike me as a waste of time, and you could just look up the cutscenes. That's why I didn't buy it. It's also absurdly priced. It would have
it,
been more expensive than the price I actually paid for Kingdom Hearts 3 to play the DLC, and I was like, yeah, I'm good.
yeah, I spent about like $120 over this entire project, and a fourth of that was just that DLC.
And I
You know what?
actually kind of feel you on the idea of like playing bad games isn't a waste of time. My perspective on bad games now is if I play a bad game, worst comes to worst, it's fodder for the podcast. Like, I actually don't think I would have finished Silt otherwise. But I
Yeah.
was like, here's something I can talk about in the podcast that's going to relate to the topics of discussion. You know what? I'm going to push through. And I think it's actually been a valuable experience kind of pushing through these bad games in other ways because kind of solidified the way I think about video games, and it's kind of helped me become, I don't know how to say this exactly, a better consumer of games. Like I understand my preferences more deeply now that I've played. Now that I've kind of forced myself through bad games, I understand what it is I don't like, and I can kind of better pinpoint what's good about a game, and I can more intelligently talk about them now. So yeah, it is valuable sometimes to kind of push through a bad game. Sorry, Cap, you were
There's
saying something?
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to mention. It's not exactly like a guide or walkthrough or whatever, but it's kind of adjacent. But there's a lot of games out there where it's like if you don't know this one thing, you miss a ton of content, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like Doki Doki Literature Club, right? Like where if you no one's going to accidentally do the thing that you need to do to basically unravel half that game, right? So that stuff kind of spreads word of mouth, or you're almost creating the game to be walkthrough. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, so I wonder, like, if it's got to be an intentional design decision. I get that, but like sometimes you'll hear about these Easter eggs that stay hidden for years. But I always wonder, kind of like, it's almost incredibly brave to do that, right? What's the other one, like Frog Fractions and stuff? All these games that kind of exist that just basically like hide an entire game inside of a game, and you have to wait and hope that enough people read the walkthrough so they don't go, "Oh, this game's stupid." Like you have to crack something to get to the real game. I think I don't know what that. There's something about that design decision. I know you don't like Doki Doki Literature Club, and I love it. It's like the only like thing I think we like anime adjacent thing I like, but um, it's so interesting to me that like there's developers out there that are willing to basically do that and take that risk, right?
See,
And then just hope enough people do the thing so they appreciate the game for what is actually there that
I
you don't get on just a cursory playthrough.
I think it's really interesting you say that because um, when you mentioned that these games are designed to be walkthrough,
Hmm.
I think these games can only really exist in the context of the modern internet, where
Right. Yeah.
you expect that this information exchange is going to happen at the virtual water cooler. And I think that's actually a really cool way in which the internet and Web 2.0, if you will, has influenced modern game design. That you can now make these games that rely on word of mouth. There's someone asking, okay, so what's the deal with this game here? And then getting that information and enhancing their experience that way. And yeah, sometimes I don't think we appreciate enough how the internet has changed the way not just games are consumed, but also the way games are made.
Right. Yeah. It's it's really it's an interesting time. Like when like we talk a lot on the avocado about like movies and TV shows like not trusting the audiences. Like there's games that are very much doing that, right? Like right now, there's very sneaky games that are kind of like, yeah, we're gonna work with something that you think and then we're just gonna throw it all out the window. So I love that idea, but I do think it's so reliant on the walkthrough, Google it culture,
Absolutely. All right. So is there anything else we want to discuss regarding guides,
Yeah,
walkthroughs,
yeah.
etc.?
I had one I wanted to bring up.
All right,
This is
sure.
going to be kind of short, but I've long said on the opposite end of this, one of the things that's not cool about walkthrough culture kind of taking over is I kind of feel like the prevalence of walkthroughs and guides has basically killed MMOs a little bit, right? Like it's hard to explain, but back when I started MMOs, like how you killed a boss or how you did an encounter was like top secret information, right? Players would try to poach people who knew strats and stuff like that, right? Now, one of the first things you're seeing, like in MMOs, is as soon as they kill a boss, here's the full walkthrough, the guide, here's the composition we used, all that kind of stuff, right? And I think because of that, a lot of people who really got addicted to MMOs back in the early days are kind of chasing something that doesn't exist anymore, right? That like feeling of figuring something out and knowing how to do it, and you and your friends knowing it, and other people not. And that feeling is gone in MMOs, and a lot of people want that back, and it is not coming back.
I think it's
Um,
also kind of had a detrimental effect on the social aspect of the game because
right.
there might be people who want to figure it out for themselves through play and other people who just want to blast through it and so they'll look stuff up. And so there's almost this expectation that you're going to be the latter kind of person, and
Mhm.
people who want to figure stuff out for themselves can't find anyone to team up with because they're
And
just
that's why.
expected to know when they go raid or whatever.
Right. Even like and I play a ton of Destiny, it's MMO light, right? But I have a bunch of friends who do day one raids, and it's not honestly because we're like we want to be world's first raiders. It's because if we don't do it day one, guess what? Everybody already knows how to do it, and you know all the strats, and you're just kind of like, kind of robotically doing the motions. And so I think in some ways that whole like walkthrough culture now has kind of made MMOs feel very different, because it used to be when I started MMOs, it would be let's get together and try to figure this thing out, right? Now, one of the first things they ask you in a lot of like MMO settings, have you watched the video? Do you know the strats? Like, do you have this thing that's required? That's very different feeling for me as an old timer MMO guy, where that was not something we did. It was like, let's try to figure this out ourselves, and versus let's go watch a video and then try to do what they do in the video, right?
Yeah, it almost kind of kills camaraderie because part of what
Right.
builds camaraderie through playing these games is the joy of discovering something or accomplishing something with a group of friends.
Right.
And if you take that away and it just becomes, all right, we want you to meet these specific requirements, and if you don't meet them, we're not going to hang out with you. It almost starts to make the whole thing feel like work. It's like, did you bring your part of the
Right.
project?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I
Did you do
get it.
your part of the group assignment, right?
And we all know how group projects go. There's always one person you have to drag along with you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
watched the video. Don't worry. Let's just go. But yeah, it's weird because the other thing it does is it creates strategies that maybe work for like a streamer or a one guild, but then it doesn't let the community figure out fights in an organic way, right? Everybody says this is how this group did it. They used 5 warriors and 3 priests, and then that's what they try to create, right? They try to emulate what worked, which I
Right.
get,
And there
right?
might be like 10 other viable strategies that no one's
Exactly,
even trying
exactly. And
because
nobody
like the
wants
top Destiny streamer used that one.
right, right. And so, well, we're looking for 3 warlocks. If you're not a warlock, you don't get in. That's stupid, right? There should always be a way to do it, but it's do you want to put in the work to find that way, or do you just want to wait for somebody else to figure out and then just do what they did? So that's the one like kind of part of like I don't know, I would call it a negative, but it's one thing in like the walkthrough culture now where I think there's a lot more let's let somebody else figure this out. And I always want to be part of the figuring it out team if I can, blind runs are sometimes what they're called, and that's what I enjoy more. And we'll figure out stuff, and we'll laugh and we'll die, and it'll take us longer than it would have took other people, but that's okay. That's where the fun is, not and okay, well, let's watch this video and then just do what they did.
To be honest, I think a lot of that figuring out energy has moved over to the speedrun community,
Yeah,
where people kind of
that's a
work
good point.
together to figure out how to crack open a game or bypass a certain time-consuming area. Like, that's where I see that kind of joy of people getting into discords together and kind of hashing out strats for getting through a certain part of a speedrun.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
There's people out there who do nothing but try to break games. They're not out to speedrun. They're just trying to find the strats. Because you get the strat named after you, and then all the speedrunners use it, and you get your name everywhere. That kind of thing can be
you get
just as rewarding. And if you have the right mindset for it, it can be just as difficult and just as rewarding.
Yeah, one of the things I notice every time I watch a speedrun marathon is like a good portion of streamers will shout out the community and say, "Don't worry if you don't have the physical skills to speedrun a game the entire way through. You can still be useful to the community by figuring out bugs and glitches and cool strats. So still, even if you don't want to speedrun this, please join the Discord." I think that's so neat that they're looking for people with all these different skill sets, and it kind of becomes this community project.
And what Waff says too is so true, where so many of the streamers are like cognizant of that, like that people are doing that, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna perform the Jester 347 roll real quick, and then I'm gonna use
absolutely.
the Cuphead 434, whatever like glitch, and like it's probably feels awesome to have something like that, named after you in a speed run.
For sure, yeah. All right, this has been a pretty wide-ranging discussion on guides and walkthroughs and all that jazz. So, if you'd like to keep up to date with the podcast, you can follow us on our website at avocadogamescast.wordpress.com. There we post each episode along with the link dump that Wolfman Jew mentioned earlier, and that fact checks a lot of the stuff that we mentioned. It also includes links to a lot of the stuff we discussed, including some of those strategy guides that we're going to post online or post links to for your benefit. If you want to listen to us on a regular basis, you can subscribe to us too. We love that. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Podcasts, we're also on Spotify. All you have to do is search for Avocado Gamescast. We're the only podcast called Avocado Gamescast. And if you see another podcast called Avocado Gamescast, that's not us. That's some other person somewhere in, I don't know, Estonia probably.
We'll get our lawyers involved.
Possibly some fools who cheated but didn't know it. They didn't grow.
It's sad that they did know the difference.
Yeah, shout outs to our Estonian fan base, by the way. We love you guys. And make sure you check out the Avocado at the-avocado.org. Very important that you put that hyphen in there. That'll take you to the right URL. You put some other bit of punctuation in there. We do not take responsibility for where that takes you. So put that hyphen in there. It's a wonderful community. We talk about video games. We talk about movies, books. Occasionally we talk about little marbles racing each other on sand. We talk about all sorts of stuff. Go check us out. We're great.
And beyond our games, we're an exciting community. We have werewolf games, politics, live religious events, which actually sounded a lot better in my head.
Yeah, community satyrs. Community satyrs. We can be specific.
Community bonding.
Yeah, look, that satyr I held kicked all kinds of ass. And I don't care how much I brag about it. That will never stop that from being the case. Also,
that's awesome.
Also,
but anyway,
I thought there was something coming after the also. Like you're gonna unveil the next banger thing we do on the Avocado.
Oh yeah, the next is award ceremonies. things where people talk about comic books, a lot of comic books. Threads all about like that C or D list DC or Marvel character you love. We've got a whole article just about them.
Absolutely.
Don't
So
forget
please do
tournaments.
check us
I
out.
love
And of
tournaments.
course, plenty of video game podcast. This podcast, a monthly roundup of game news. Another podcast that goes called Franchise Festival that goes deep on specific video game franchises. Um, we have Mid-Aughts Meltdown about games from the Mid-Aughts. We have an entire series on platformers. We
One
have
Giant Leap.
called One Giant Leap. We have a series of 30-minute retro reviews, lots of great gaming content. Please check it out if you haven't already. And with that, I guess we're calling this podcast to a close. So thank you, the Kappa. Thank you, Wolfman Jew. Thank you, Wafflicious, for doing your first podcast about video games. You might have done other video game podcasts. Your first awesome podcast about video games.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
That
it
was
was.
awesome.
I've been trying to get you for a while, so it's so glad. I'm so glad to finally have you. Um, Thank you to our listeners, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Good night.
Night.